Jonah, and Jonah chapter 4 and verse 11, just to introduce what we're talking about a little bit here today. At the end of the story of Jonah, you know, all know the story of Jonah going to the city of Nineveh. Well, at the end of the book, God says to Jonah, he says, but the Lord says, you have been concerned about this vine, though you did not tend it or make it grow. It sprang up overnight and died overnight. But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and many cattle as well. Well, what is God talking about here? It sounds very demeaning that he says Nineveh has a population, has 120,000 people that don't know their right hand from their left. That sounds pretty demeaning of God to call a bunch of people in the city, you dummies, you don't know your right hand from your left. Well, he might be talking about the population of Nineveh. Scholars have debated over what does this really mean. And some say it means that people didn't know right from wrong. Other people say he might be referring to 120,000 children, infants, who still don't know their right hand from their left. So, you know, you can debate about what does it really mean. There's different articles on it. But if it means the little children, we're talking about the powerless. God goes on in Jonah chapter 4 and verse 11, he says, but Nineveh has more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left. Now watch this, and many cattle as well. Well, what's the cattle about? Is God a Hindu? That he's concerned about the cows? Well, the cows represent the businessmen of the city. Nineveh was an agricultural city. It got its wealth from the agricultural land surrounding it and the cattle. So Ray Bakke, who expounds very often on this passage, he says that this passage demonstrates to us that cities need the whole gospel to the whole city, from the powerless and to the powerful and everything in between. Urban missions in the Western context has often meant ministry only to the poor. Well, urban mission is ministry to the poor, but it's also ministry to the upper class and the middle class who may not be materially poor, but are poor in spirit. Mother Teresa, the great urban saint of Calcutta, she said, when asked, please define poverty, she said, poverty is the inability to reflect. Who has that problem? I think a lot of people in Wall Street have that problem. I think a lot of people in Google and Apple have that problem. I think a lot of people in North Beach, which we're going to hear about today, have that problem. We are called to reach the whole city, not just a slice of the city, from the powerless to the powerful and everything in between. So welcome to our call today. And on our call, we have Jen and Marcus, who are with us on the call. And they're with Youth with a Mission in the neighborhood of North Beach called Little Italy. And also Steve Binquist, who's on the call, who lives and works in the neighborhood of the Tenderloin. Two polar opposites. Just like on the call, we have John Clark coming in from Sweden and Dave Brody from Santiago, Chile. Very, very opposite in geography. Here we are in a city of 7 miles by 7 miles and two neighborhoods about a 30-minute walk apart from one another that are extremely different from each other. Jen and Marcus have been living in North Beach for about 8 or 9 years now. They'll describe it a bit more. And Steve has been living in the Tenderloin for now coming on 18 years, I believe, both ministering all that time in their respective places. And they come with us to us with very rich backgrounds in ministry experience. So I'm going to ask both of them, and perhaps Marcus and Jen, you can start off first. Can you describe your neighborhoods to us? Jen and Marcus first, and then Steve. Can you describe your neighborhood to us, and the kind of people that live there? That would help us to set the context.
Yeah, for sure. So North Beach, it's also called Little Italy. It's a really beautiful part of the city. Like, if you want to visit, like, definitely don't miss out on North Beach. Lots of good pizza, lots of good, like, Italian food all over the place. It's such a great place. And when you look at the history, like, when you look at North Beach from that perspective, like, there was a lot of movements coming from North Beach, like the beatnik movement, as an example, was very strong here. That's like a pre-hippie movement. And then in North Beach, you're going to find, like, still a lot of poets. You're still going to find a lot of artists that live, like, in the neighborhood. But then you're also going to find a lot of, like, people that are middle and upper class in the neighborhood. So it's kind of like a very mixed, diverse neighborhood. It used to be Italian, but when you look at North Beach now, I would say, like, it's there's still Italians here. Like, not all of them left, but a lot of the Italians actually moved to suburbs. And now it became more of a Chinese neighborhood. There's, like, a lot more Chinese living in the neighborhood. And then, of course, you have a lot of tech people that moved into the neighborhood. And then, like, you have people that lived here for a real long time and they just never moved. Like, one of our neighbors, like, he lived here for, I think, like 35 or 40 years now. He rebuilt a house across the street, and then he just stayed, like, in his apartment. He just never left.
We also seem to attract a lot of politicians and leaders of the city as well.
Yeah, I think North Beach is one of those neighborhoods in San Francisco that's eccentric, that's colorful, that's filled with great restaurants, a lot of pizza, pasta, famous for coffee shops all over the place. What are some of the famous coffee shops, Jen and Marcus, in North Beach?
Café Trieste is probably the most famous one at this point, where the poets come together, and it's kind of like a little neighborhood hub, like, where people just come together. And then there's a few newer ones where people go to, but the newer ones, they're kind of mainly, you find a lot of people working in them, like from tech, which in the last year, not so much, because everything was shut down, obviously. But before, it was kind of like an office. Like, the coffee shops are in our neighborhood kind of like the offices and the meeting places where people come together, and also, like, yeah, the community hubs in a sense.
And every coffee shop has its own sort of group of people that it attracts.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the birthplace of the beatnik movement. It's famous for one of its bookstores called City Lights, which is a big hangout. Lawrence Ferlinghetti just died recently, and he was honored at the City Lights bookstore. It's the North Beach Fair, where people go every year for great music and good food and hang out. And then it's also the center for the St. Francis of Assisi National Shrine, the patron saint of our city. So it's a neighborhood that's small. About approximately how many streets, and approximately what's the population of the neighborhood?
So we have about 27,000 people. How many streets? I don't know. I never counted it, but it's not very big. Like, it's a smaller neighborhood.
You could walk from one side of the neighborhood to the other side in 15 minutes or so?
Yeah, about 15 minutes. And what's unique about it too, with that walking, you can walk, like, to every store. And the stores in the neighborhood itself, they're all, like, just here in the neighborhood. So we had a map store which just sold maps of the city and other places, or we have a store that sells, like, leather stuff from Afghanistan, or, like, rags and stuff like that. So we have very unique places in the neighborhood that are just, like, specifically for North Beach. You won't find it anywhere else. and there's no chains in North Beach proper. Like outside, a little bit at the border, you're gonna find Trader Joe's and Safeway, but in North Beach itself, it's all like just local businesses.
And Jen and Marcus are speaking to us today from North Beach itself. They're in their home on Telegraph Hill, right next to Coit Tower, with the parakeets flying around in their trees surrounding their apartment building. It's a beautiful neighborhood. If you can picture a neighborhood that's with cafes and people sitting on dining tables out on the street. North Beach has always been known for that. One of those artistic neighborhoods that's a little bit more European than the rest of the city in many ways. Steve, coming over to you now from the Tenderloin. Could you describe for us a little bit about the neighborhood that you live in for the last 18 years and that you work in every day, and you walk across it from your house to your place of work? Tell us a little bit about the Tenderloin, Steve.
Of course. The Tenderloin is a wonderful neighborhood. It's about 30 square blocks. Population's about 30,000 people who live in the neighborhood. We have a lot of families, low-income families, a lot of immigrant families that come into the city. We have amazing food. We have some of the best Indian food and Yemeni food and so many other types of food in the Tenderloin. We house or have a lot of the unhoused population of San Francisco. According to the last point in time count, we have about 3,500 to 3,600 unhoused in the Tenderloin, and that's of about 8,000 plus unhoused in the city itself. So our district, and specifically our neighborhood in the Tenderloin, houses mostly, or has about 3,000 unhoused. We also, our neighborhood is about justice and mercy. I think the gift that the Tenderloin can give the city is there's a lot of people who will stand up for the little guy in a lot of ways. And you can see that in the neighborhood and in the DNA of the Tenderloin. So which is an amazing thing to be a part of and to witness on a daily basis, which is cool. So our neighborhood, obviously, like every neighborhood and every place, has its issues. The city of San Francisco have more and more, I think, treated the Tenderloin a little bit more as a containment zone for specifically it's the drug issue. So we have a lot of basically we have an open drug market in the Tenderloin right now. And we can consistently see people use drugs pretty openly. So yeah, we see that a lot. If you are in San Francisco and if you have the Citizens app, I'm sure you have noticed a lot of activity in the TL once the sun goes down, meaning that basically there's times where there is different types of crimes and some hot spots in the TL. So we do have our warts or the things that this neighborhood struggles with or has a hard time with, but really there's a lot of beauty in the Tenderloin. We have our own national forest about 4 blocks away from the YWAM office, which is great. It's a little hidden gem. Tim can tell you all about it. There's a pizza oven and beautiful trees and lots of fun stuff. We have great parks and great activists in the neighborhood who really fight for both the residents and the unhoused. So the Tenderloin has a huge gift to offer people.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I think the Tenderloin, Steve described it, very different from North Beach, with a lot of low-income neighbors that we have here. I believe there are 208 hotels in the Tenderloin, not hotels for tourists, but hotels for low-income people called SROs, single resident occupancy, originally built after the earthquake to house the lawyers, doctors, and construction workers that they were bringing into San Francisco to rebuild the city from the ashes, house them here in the Tenderloin. Those 208 hotels today are for low-income people. We house 10,000 people in those 208 hotels in our 30 blocks, with about 3,000 living on the street, and many of them at the front door of YWAM if you've ever been here. And Steve just does a remarkable job ministering to people. He'll be sharing about that here as we go forward. So just imagine two different neighborhoods, two different demographics. The Tenderloin's a neighborhood where, the Hilton Hotel is right at our corner at the Tenderloin, and they tell their guests in the Hilton Hotel, don't go out that back door. That's the Tenderloin. Stay away from it. As where they tell them, if you totally different neighborhoods, both of them city, both of them needing to be reached with the gospel, both of them needing the presence of Christ in that place. So I'd like to ask you guys, and coming back to Jen and Marcus, can you describe some, whatever you want to describe, programs or activities or endeavors or strategies that you have used over the last 8 years to build bridges of love that is now opening doors for conversations of faith? I know it didn't happen overnight, but tell us a little bit. What are some of the things that you've done in the past?
Yeah, so
And in the present?
Yeah. So when we first came about 9 years ago, we didn't come with an agenda. We just came asking ourselves the question, what do the people here care about? And how can we love them in a way that speaks love to them? Obviously, we know that they need Jesus, but they may not know that. And so one of the things that happened actually was we had a violent crime committed on our street after we moved here, which was very unusual. Everybody was up in arms, and trying to figure out what's going on. And so immediately, the need there was safety and coming together as a neighborhood. And so we helped to form a neighborhood watch group. I became the co-captain, and immediately through those meetings, we met 50 or more of our neighbors. And so that was just such a great way to build relationships through simply serving through the neighborhood watch group.
And another thing we did, we started going to coffee shops in the neighborhood, specifically one of them, and we went there twice a week and just invited people to join us. Say we put an ad on Craigslist and said, hey, join us at the coffee shop. If you look for a friend, hang out with us. For a long time, no one showed up. But then eventually we became friends with all the workers in the coffee shop, started investing in them and started loving on them. And then one person eventually showed up. And out of that one person, we got really connected in so many ways in the neighborhood. They brought us into an athletic club in the neighborhood where you could mainly get in as if you're actually an Italian, and we're not actually Italian. So, and then he connected us with a senior place in the neighborhood. And so just to that one person, that was a different person, okay. But yeah, that too. But through that, just being in that coffee shop, just inviting people to join us, we got connected with the community, and we got to know as well, a ton of people that are actually in the neighborhood. And then we started an encouragement group in that coffee shop where we just invited people to come and there's so much negativity in the world. So we're hey, why don't you come? And we share positive, encouraging things with each other. And we usually did it and prayed before. And then we asked God, how can we encourage people?
Marcus, what is an encouragement club?
Okay, so pretty much, it is a group where people come together and speak encouraging words into their life. So we start off with a little check-in. They share about their week. And then the second part is you share something encouraging you read during the week. It might have been something you read somewhere, or you heard from somebody, or in a sermon.
Do I have to be a Christian? Do I have to be a Christian in your club?
No, the majority of people that are there aren't Christians, but God opened the door now to pray for them and to actually share our faith with them, because of the encouragement group. And so they came and at the end they can request encouragement if they need encouragement. And so through that, we were able to connect with people and really speak into their lives. And that all happened in this local coffee shop.
No, this is amazing. An encouragement club. I'm going to come back to you, Jen and Marcus, here in just a bit. So wind up another story for us. But Steve, would an encouragement club work in the Tenderloin? And what are you doing that has been working? Can you comment on that encouragement club for us?
Yeah, I think the encouragement club is great. I don't think it would be the most strategic club for the Tenderloin, but yeah, there is so much need in the Tenderloin, right? Like if you know the neighborhood, you know what I'm talking about, and so there's like a million things that we could pick to do. The way that we've kind of evolved over the years is the center of everything has been relationship. Is we're about building relationship, because people ask me all the time, like, what's going to solve homelessness in San Francisco? And the answer is relationship. There's over 8,000 people who are unhoused in San Francisco, and that means there are over 8,000 answers to the unhoused things in San Francisco. What creates people, what makes people unhoused? There are over 8,000 different answers, because each person is complex and each person has their own trauma and pain and things that they need to walk through. It's not just let's build more housing, though we need lots more housing in San Francisco, but it's about engaging relationally. So a lot of what we've done is listen to the community through relationship and responded. And what I mean by that is we were in a police station meeting, and basically people were like, there's no place for the people on the street to hang out. So what do? We opened a drop-in center, because that was a need of the community. And then people needed a shower, and we had showers. So we're like, okay, let's open our showers. And so we let people use showers. And a guy was on his way to an interview and needed a haircut, and we had haircutting tools. So we gave him a haircut, and we started doing haircuts. And so the things that we've done, the programs that we've done, the services that we've done have all been centered on relationships. And we've done long-term Bible study discipleship program, one that we're hoping to start up again soon, called 360, which is a year-long program.
Steve, I'm going to come back to that. Because what you just shared so already is so much stuff. And I want to come back to that. And so wind that one up for me a little bit. But what I'm seeing here is the similarities, but differences. Both of you said we started first by understanding the needs of our community. So it didn't start with a program that you thought, let me do this program. This is what people need. But it started with listening to the community and understanding, and that came out differently from both sides. The North Beach community, maybe more upper class, feeling a lot of loneliness, needed some encouragement. Whereas the Tenderloin, people needing a haircut or needing showers or a drop-in center where they could get off the brutal pavement during the daytime and the oftentimes tension on the sidewalks. YWAM provides a place for them. Back to Jen and Marcus, and I'm going to come back to you, Steve. Didn't mean to cut you off there, but just want to make sure I'm unpacking this stuff for everybody on the call, because there's so much rich stuff you guys are saying. Jen and Marcus, tell me some more things that you've done, whether it's been your German pancakes or your Bollywood dancing or the different things. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll get the
so one of the things we did, like we did a neighbor brunch where we just invited our neighbors in. Our neighbors are very, like, we have from like people that are really struggling to make it to multimillionaires. So, and they're all coming to our brunch, and I make German pancakes. They're like different than American pancakes. They're more like grapes. And then we're sitting around our little table that you see right behind us, and people just sit there and talk. And it's amazing what can happen through that. Like out of that, like a community was built up here, and people make comments.
Marcus, can I interject?
Yeah.
Your place where you're inviting people to is about what? Your house is about 400 square feet.
Yeah, 450.
450, but actually where you invite people
make it
in
so
is
small, 450 square feet. And how do people from an upper class background feel coming into such a small, excuse me if I say it, shoebox of an apartment?
Yeah, the funny thing is they don't seem to care. They may live, or a neighbor right over here, Norman, he has a big home that he lives in by himself. but he comes right across the street to our tiny little space and will be crammed in, you know, our dining table with you know, 6 other people. And so I think it's just providing an atmosphere of warmth and welcome and friendship.
Yeah.
And showing people that you really care. I feel like a lot of people are really longing for community, longing for a place to belong. And that's doesn't matter which neighborhood you're in. That's the same in Steve's neighborhood as in ours. Like, people want to belong. Like, people want to have a place where they feel home. And that dining table is one of those places. Like,
yeah, I don't know if you guys remember the song Can't Buy Me Love. Dun, 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 dun. Okay. So yeah, I mean, economics has nothing to do with wanting to feel loved and have friendships and a sense of belonging, right?
Beautiful. So you've really broken through the barrier of whether it's different economic classes by demonstrating building bridges of love that connect people. And your house has become a house of hospitality on the top of Telegraph Hill, which is really the core of, in many ways, a central place in North Beach, or a famous place in North Beach, I should say, next to Coit Tower.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Steve, coming back to you, tell us some more. Listening to Jen and Marcus, can you continue on and contrast a little bit? And one of the things I heard too, Steve, if you can get into, a lot of strategy, mission strategy has been, you got to believe first, then you belong. But I'm hearing a flip here from both of you guys saying, no, we want people to belong first, and then they will eventually believe. Can you unpack that a little bit for us, Steve?
Yeah, I'd love to. Pre-COVID, we made a conscious decision that we weren't just going to ever give out food. Our decision was we were going to, everything that we would give out from a food based would be relationship based. It'd be around a table. It'd be centered around friendship. It'd be centered around choice. It'd be centered around dignity. We didn't just want to hand out food. Food is a need, but it's not the major need. The major need is relationship. And so it's the idea of inviting anybody to the table. Like, I don't care if you're a believer, if you're high, if you're whatever, like, you belong at this table because you're a human, because Jesus said in Matthew 25, however I treat the least of these in society, it's how I treat him. So therefore you can come to my table. You belong here because you're my brother, you're my sister. And it's that position of belonging that I think actually starts to transform people and opens up their heart to an ability to believe and a willingness to believe in something different. And so for us, like, that's, so we do this thing called Scrub and Grub, and we would invite people to come in, and they would help us cook dinner. They would help us do chores. They'd help us clean dinner. They'd help us do everything. And the idea is that you're a part of this. Like, you're making the decisions of food and of all this, and you're cleaning up, and we're hanging out and we're laughing. And sure, we would do like a prayer or a short devotional, but it wasn't about that. What it was about us all grabbing brooms together and sweeping our storefront at the end of the day, and talking and laughing and playing jokes on each other. So it was this idea of, like, you belong to this community, not because of the faith that we share, but because of the fact that Jesus invites us into relationship with each other. And yes, the hope and the dream is that people would come to faith and come to know Jesus, but that personal decision that they make doesn't predicate how we serve, how we love, and how we invite people in to our community and into belonging. Because that's what people, like Jen said it brilliantly, like, that's what people want. They want belonging. We all do. Everyone on this call does, like, right? We want to belong to something. And so, yeah.
That's good, Steve. I remember Steve and I came across a quote one time that really summed up what he wanted to do with the ministry that he leads here at YWAM San Francisco. And I'll read it to you really quick. It's by Leela Watson. It says, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." And what I've seen over the years with both of these ministries is really trying to help people belong first. And as they belong, then they start believing. Jen and Marcus, can I jump back to you guys? And can you expound a little bit on that? The belonging, then it becomes believing, and maybe one of the journeys of any of the people that you've been working with, or the way in which you've been working with them. Take it from there.
Yeah, well, I think often as a church, and I love Christians, I love the church. We are the body, but we want to just get out there on the street and we want to preach, and now that works in certain places. But we've just discovered through building relationship. For example, our one friend Rhonda, who lives just right over here beside us, she began coming to our brunches, eating German pancakes together. When she would leave to go away on a trip, we would feed her fish or get her packages. Over just 8 years, we just became really good friends, and we began to pray for her that we would have opportunities to have more spiritual conversations out of that relationship. And so we prayed for her almost every day for 3 years, I think it was.
It was 3 or 4
Yeah,
years.
we, through relationship, we found out that she meditated every day, and had some going over to her house. We saw Buddhist and Hindu statues there, and so we started to pray that she would have an encounter with Jesus during her meditation time. Okay, well, we pray those things. We don't always expect them to actually happen. But the other day, I felt really impressed during the COVID season when she was just kind of trapped inside her home, to write her a card encouraging her to invite Jesus into her home. Now, this is after, again, relationship, having spiritual discussions. And she emails me 2 days later, and a long email. It says, Jen, oh my goodness. The other day, I've been meditating for 15 years. The other day, Jesus appeared to me in my meditation time and said, I am the way. Well, first of all, don't be afraid. I'm with you. Have peace. And then I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. And then the next day, I got your card at my door, and I knew she was open to messages from God. So I wrote, I have a message from God for you, and saying to invite Jesus into my home. And I really think that that's something I need to start to do. And now we're having, more conversation around that. But that all came out of 8 years of relationship.
Beautiful. That is just fantastic. If people on the call here, you have questions, please put them in the chat, and I'll make sure that I'll read your question to Jen and Marcus or Steve, and they can answer it. You can address it generally, or you can address it to me, or you can address it to them, and we'll make sure that we try to get to that. But that's just a beautiful story. 8 years of working on a relationship, and then seeing a breakthrough where Jesus came in a time of meditation and revealed himself to them. Similarities and differences. I think a lot of that's coming out as we talk. And if you guys want to mention some of that, on our website, ywamsanfrancisco.org, maybe Cassie can put a link to it. I didn't tell her about this beforehand. But under resources, we have a lot of videos there, but one of the videos that really talks to this topic today is called The Urban Jesus. And it's done by Dr. Ray Bakke, and he contrasts the upper class Pharisee, Nicodemus, with the woman at the well. And he talks about how the two are so different from one another and their journey towards Jesus. Nicodemus took years, just like the lady we just heard about from Jen, who took years before she came to Christ. Whereas sometimes amongst the more material poor, the response is very quick. So some differences and similarities. Steve, you want to tell us a story or comment on some of the similarities and differences that you're picking up in this call also?
Yeah, reminded of Psalms 86. The psalmist starts out basically saying, like, God, I'm poor and needy. All right, it's David saying this. And I think there's this understanding that, like, we're all in need. We all live in some sort of poverty. And I think there's like poverty in the Tenderloin and there's poverty in North Beach. And Tim already talked about that, but there's that similarity. Like, yes, poverty of money, or I don't know how to say that right. Not having money is a poverty, and not having resources is something that's needed to flip, and people need to grow. Like, people need resources. That's important. But really what keeps people here is that poverty of relationship, or the poverty of like not being able to reflect or understand who they are. And so I think just understanding that can sometimes keep people locked up in a home in North Beach is fear and with lack of relationship. And it can also keep people locked up in an SRO or on the street is fear and lack of relationship. And so I think there's a ton of similarities. And one of the things that has, or a story that always comes to mind, is of a really good friend. And when I first met him, when you use a lot of meth, or use meth, one of the things that you can kind of do is work with electronics a lot. Like, you like to tinker with things, basically. It's one of the things that kind of it happens with meth addicts. And so he would come into our drop-in center and he would tinker with stuff. There'd be phones everywhere. You'd be talking about conspiracy theories, or, all that kind of fun stuff, tinkering with electronics. And he would come in on a regular basis, and knew him for about a year and a half, and didn't really talk about name, would say hi and we would chat. And then about a year and a half into it, I got connected with his sister online. He just wanted me to let his sister know that he was okay. And I got connected with his sister, and then she, the next day, literally calls me on Facebook Messenger thing, and she says, "I need to talk to my brother. Our older brother just passed away last night." And so I'm walking to work into our drop-in center. I'm like, oh man, like, this is like, I don't know what's going to happen. So I call him in before we open up. I sit him down and I say, "Your sister needs to talk to you." I hand him my phone, and he just breaks down weeping. And grab him and we hug, and he starts crying, and we start talking a little bit. And then he sits in his normal spot, gets his phones out, and I look at my coworker. I'm like, we got to do something. And we end up just like, "Hey, can you help us?" And he ends up basically sitting and running our front desk for like a year and a half, where he comes in every morning and he hands out mail and he helps us organize. And he went from someone who I couldn't have a regular conversation with, to someone crying on my shoulder, to someone expressing how harder it is for him to trust people, someone who said that he'll never get housing because everybody's against him, to someone who now is in an SRO, has housing, who's contemplating what life looks like out of like not using meth on a regular basis, to someone who like, he's talking about Jesus and he's praying and he volunteers with us when he can. So like, that process is what we're about, right? It's relationship. And it's just like, sometimes it's throwing stuff against the wall and being like, this is what I think you need. And so I'm going to throw it out there, and being relationship focused. And I mean, we've yelled at each other. He has said a lot of nice things to me. And it's just that consistent like choice to forgive and maintain relationship. And like, I've yelled at him and, been like annoyed at him and just like blown him off for the day or whatever. And I've had to go back and apologize. But it's that real relationship where like we're tied together. And that's what our hope is to be tied to the people of the neighborhood, that we're not just there to serve, though we are, but we're there to be a part of the community where we live together, we work together, we weep together. And so that's really what we're looking for. So that's one of my favorite kind of stories that's still in action. So
what I'm hearing from you guys, and from you especially there, Steve, is we're not doing something for people, we're doing something with people. It's a witness Christianity, not a for you Christianity. But you're identifying, you're incarnating, you're being with the people and really walking with them. What are your guys, Jen and Marcus, what do you want to see in 2021? How do you want to see your ministry get more traction? I know people on the call will want to be praying for you. Give us a few thoughts on that.
Yeah, so some of the big vision of the ministry is like to empower others to do what we're doing, like to really teach them how to love their neighbors and how to see the Great Commission right where they're at, not just like overseas, but also right across the street, in their neighborhoods, in their cities. And for that, we started doing workshops, like, which were really successful in this last season. And we want to keep doing those. So to teach people like how to do it, like interactive workshops. So that's a little bit like for this next season. And then we're also working close together with our church in the city, and they're implementing it more and more, like, and want to teach the people there. So we're starting to implement it more into the local church for this coming year, where the people see like their homes as like a church, and see like their homes as like, yeah, this is where I want to touch people because there's people around me. To see like literally the neighbor. And that's kind of like a little bit the vision for 2021 or ahead, to really empower people to, yeah, love in their neighborhoods, and not just see mission overseas, but see it also local, and not to forget like the people around them, and give them tools into their hands. And then we're working on a book, which we're doing some rewriting on it, because some of the stories, like, we wrote it over 5 years, so it's kind of like we have to adjust a bunch of things
A
now.
lot of things happened in 2020, actually. Like the story I just shared earlier, that were just incredible, that we want to have in there as well. So we might switch out some stories or figure that out as well.
And another thing, we're praying for bigger space, like a house in neighborhood, like where we can host people more, like, because like we had 40 people in our tiny space for barbecue, but with COVID situation, like, I don't know if that's gonna happen again. So we eventually need a bigger place. And we also noticed, like, in this last season, we were doing a lot of video teaching, and a lot of like produced a lot of videos, which actually will be in the chat, some links where you can get them, like a weekly update, like how to love your neighbor with a weekly tip. So we want to do more of that, but it's kind of like our space is very limited. So like, yeah, so you can pray with us for a house in North Beach.
Great. I hope Cassie will put in the chat channel your YouTube link, I believe. Great videos, short videos, creative things of how to reach into your neighborhood. And some of this was even developed during COVID, where gatherings were not be able to come together. Jen and Marcus thought out of the box and thought, how do we reach our neighborhood while everybody's sheltered in place? Let's not stop being neighbors. Let's be neighbors and keep touching people through that. Steve, 2021 and beyond, where are you wanting to take your ministry and what you're doing in the Tenderloin?
Yeah, we've got a lot of dreams. And so we're really hoping, again, in conversation with different organizations and with people in the neighborhood, just realizing the huge need for more like long-term kind of transitional housing for people, specifically people coming out of rehab, right? Like we want to see, as people come out of the different programs, whether Christian or non-Christian programs, that they've been, they've kicked their habit, or whatever you want to call it, to be in a space where they can continue discipleship and mentorship and build just job skills. So we would love to have a space, have a building where we could house people after they get out of their, like a sober living home, basically. We'd also are right now in the midst of working with a lot of different organizations in partnership with economic development. So helping people with job skills, whether getting them jobs in restaurants or in different other different other fields that they'd be interested in. So we're working on that right now, and we're really excited about that, getting that off the grounds this year. We're doing a discipleship program called 360, which is a year-long program where people would come in Monday through Friday, 9 to 1, and just show up. You got to show up on time. You have to go through the whole of the program, and we would do lectures. Basically, we would do development, spiritual formation, all that kind of fun stuff, and we couple that again with economic development, soft skills, things like that, getting people and then helping them with services. We've been training with another organization called Hospitality House, and they've been training us on how to do case management work. We're not going to open like a case management center, but what we're going to do is use the skills and the resources that they're giving us to work with individually and to help them with housing and different other services. So yeah, our real hope again is to have another space that we can house people, and some of that's emergency housing too. Like as people, we just had one of our dear friends get kicked and get kind of beat up, and just really wish we were able to have like a space for 3 days where they could come and be and kind of heal up, not just from the physical pain, but also the emotional and the lack of safety. And to be able to kind of be there for that. So we'd love to be able to have a space where we can house people for those things. So yeah, it's a little bit of where we're going. I mean, the sky is really the limit. We'd love to see us open up our own detox and our own rehab, and spoil people as they're taking steps forward in their lives. So
Thanks, Steve. That's great. I think people on the call, you can remember some of these needs that are very key, and just two that I'll point out. 2 B's, remember 2 letter B's for Jen and Marcus, the release of their book. That's such a key tool. This is a book that I think is very much needed for their, the things that they bring to the table have been proven over years of ministry in the school of hard knocks, where they've really learned it in the neighborhood. To see another building. We were offered a building here in the Tenderloin, nearby, 14 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, 2 kitchens. And my board said, go for it, Tim. As long as you can give a down payment of $800,000 on a $2 million property. And it just didn't happen. We prayed and took it to the Lord, and he has his own timing. We have a building next door that we can tear down. We own it. It would only cost us $15 million to rebuild there. But these are things that are big dreams, but I believe they're going to happen. So pray with us, both of these things, that the release of the book, the release of building would take place. And then I'm going to ask another question here, but I want to put in here too, that you have their contact information here. Get these people in your churches, your small groups. Their teaching is incredible. Their workshops on reaching people. If you're on the call and you need them in a YWAM center or in your church, they can do it by Zoom. Their workshops, their material is just fantastic. Steve took 1 hour with us yesterday as a staff, and he taught on de-escalation when we're dealing with very tense situations at our front door. And I just sat there amazed at the richness that came out of him of compassion and understanding people of the neighborhood and how do we treat them as human beings. I can't speak enough about them. Get them into your small groups, in your churches, at your Bible studies, or at your different things that you pull together. As we wrap up, guys, what would you encourage people on the call and how they can build bridges of love in their own context? What are some things that you would want to leave behind for them that they could really take from this call?
I think
Marcus?
one of the big things I think like we did when we moved to the neighborhood was really getting to know the neighborhood, and we did that through prayer walking, like going into every business, praying, figuring out what's actually there. And it gives you like a greater heart, especially if you start prayer walking. And then another thing that I want to encourage you on is like, start praying for your neighbors, start praying for the people right around you. Like if you don't know them, figure out their names and then start praying for them on a daily basis, because it starts shifting your community. It starts shifting the way you see people, and it really deeply connects you with them. And this is a great way to start in your neighborhood.
Yeah, and a lot of times we want people to come to us, right? But we need to go where the people are. And so join the block party, join the fairs, join the whatever's going on in your area. It's going to look different than where it looks like for us or for Steve. And so that's where you kind of have to get to know your area as well. where are the people? What are they doing? What do they care about? What are the needs? And then you just go and join in on that. And then I would just say, yeah, just begin to prayer walk, like Marcus said, begin to do research on the area. And
Jen, you joined in with Bollywood dancing, didn't you? And the Alcatraz cold water swim.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that I just was already interested in that people were doing. And so it can be very authentic. It doesn't have to be like, I'm joining this in order to share the gospel. It can be, I actually want to swim in the cold bay water from Alcatraz. And so I'm going to join the South End Rowing Club that's been there for over 100 years, is one of this big, places in the city. And I'm going to have these great conversations in the sauna with these ladies. Or, I'm going to take a jewelry making class because it's such an artistic area and I'm actually interested in learning about jewelry making. And then I get into spiritual conversations while I'm hammering on metal or whatever. And so it can just flow so naturally with your interests and the interests of others around you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I believe you also did Bollywood dancing, correct?
I did that at one point as well. Yes.
What would you want to leave behind with people on the call?
Yeah, I think just show up. I think that's like what Jen and Marky said. I think just be present and be as present as you can. I think is some of the key steps for me. And I think specifically being present where there's no believers, or there's a little like people aren't necessarily believers, I think is really key as well. So I might be frozen because you are all frozen. So.
Oh, you're okay, Steve. We can hear you. All right, but as we close up, let me leave you with those words that Steve just uttered there. I remember I talked with a urban minister one time in the city of Delhi, and I was asking about another man who has a very successful ministry, Sunil Sadar, who ministers to thousands of people in the low caste. And I asked the other guy, I said, why is he so successful? And he said, he looked at me and he said, 4 words, Tim, remember these 4 words. He just shows up. And I think that Steve summarized it for us right now. Be present. Be present. That's what these guys are talking about. Be present in the place where God has put you. Love the place. Love that place, even if it's a difficult company or a difficult neighborhood or a difficult job or whatever it may be. Love that place with all that you have. And as Jen and Marcus said, pray for it, pray for the people, and then let God's love flow through you. So as we close, I don't see any questions in the chat, unless Cassie, I'm wrong, and you can fire them to me, but I don't see any questions coming in. I want to encourage you on the call here, if you want to give, I want to make an appeal to these people right here. They don't get paid to do this. They raise their own support. And I know that both of them could use more monthly regular supporters. If you want to support them, go on our website and support them. Put their name in you can go to click and pledge on our website and their drop down will be there. Put their names in. If you want to give them a one-time offering, do that. They didn't know that I was going to do this. They didn't ask me to do it, but I'm doing it. You cannot do ministry without the right people. And, one of our strategies at YWAM San Francisco is releasing micro-focused leaders amongst neighborhoods or amongst unreached people groups or amongst areas like art or justice or human trafficking. You're looking at two different sets of neighborhoods here, represented by Steve Binquist and Jen and Marcus, that have said, give me this place. God has called me here, and I want to see his kingdom come. That to me is more precious than having a new $14 million building or any other asset that we could get. There's no greater asset than having people. Many times people ask me, Tim, what's the greatest thing you need in YWAM? And I always tell them, I need more leaders like Jen and Marcus and Steve and Caleb Binquist. They're worthy of support. And if you want to just even give them a one-time offering, go onto our website and do that. You'll be blessed and they'll be blessed, and invite them over to your place. Well, thanks for coming today. I'm going to end the call, but I'll hang around for a while. If any of you just want to talk, I'll be glad to do that. And if Jen and Marcus have time to hang around, and Steve, that's great. If not, I'll hang around for a while and just chat with you. But thank you so much for being on the call today. And I hope you've been blessed. I'm always blessed listening to stories from North Beach and stories from the Tenderloin of what God is doing through these remarkable people that we've had on the call today. God bless.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Yes, nice to see you all. Thanks for coming.
Yes, it was awesome.